Well, first off, I saw you reacted. I posted your reaction to my video. The Destiny Champion Spotlight. Did you feel it was a fair representation of you?
I thought it was pretty funny. Yeah. In terms of fair representation, I mean, it depends.
Not funny. Obviously, it was funny. Everything I do is what I want it to be. Hilarious,
sure.
But
when we do comedy and humor, when we say, was it fair? Yeah. I mean, I have to dive a lot into what the joke is when you're saying it versus how I would interpret the joke versus how I think your audience would interpret the joke versus your understanding of all those interpretations. So like, if I'm in front of two audiences, like I could, I think all of these are different. So I could say something like, Donald Trump just became president, and he finally got to enact his Muslim ban. So no more Muslims in the country anymore. Based that Donald Trump got rid of all the Muslims, finally, based. If I were to say that in front of a left-leaning audience, they would laugh because Donald Trump and banning Muslims is evil and crazy, and the fact that he would like do that so blatantly, that would be like the joke. If I said it in front of a conservative audience, they would laugh because they think it's genuinely cool that he did it and he's like being so open and outward about it. And then so when I'm saying it, like whatever my intention is, like depending on who I'm in front of and how they interpret it, like all of these things. So all of this to say that when you ask me, was it fair? There are interpretations where everything you said was fair, and there are interpretations where I would staunchly disagree, but I'm not familiar enough with you or your audience to know how I would interpret those things.
That's fair. Did you think it was an accurate representation of reality to have the Dr. Destiny, Mr. Borelli toggle?
Maybe. I'd have to go back and watch it particularly. I don't remember coming away thinking like, God, that's just he's so wrong, like being upset about it. So yeah.
You were, I think you were distracted while you were reacting to it, which is
wow.
That's okay. I forgive you.
Well,
you go back and watch.
Okay.
But like the point of those, I mean, you agree that comedy has to be in contact with reality, right?
Not only do I agree with it, every single person agrees with this. People don't realize sometimes that they agree with it because they get into literally autistic arguments. But yes, comedy has to have some reference to reality. Otherwise, it's not fucking funny. I find most often people will say things like, it's just a joke when they don't want to acknowledge like the underlying connection or something. But yeah, of course, for sure. Comedy has to have some connection to reality. Yeah.
Yeah. And the degree to which something is funny is definitely parameterized by the degree to which it's true. Because if you try to make like a propagandistic joke, it falls flat immediately.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. Yeah. And especially when you're doing parody and satire based on League of Legends, right? Like if you can show something that's true about me and true about like top lane or something in League at the same time, right? There's like an extra
or
fun.
to use, like I was saying with the toggle ability, like that's a mechanic that people understand and you can toggle back and forth. I guess my question is, because you are one of the more significant figures in the online political space, I guess I'm curious to understand sort of your approach to things, how you see things, the degree to which I guess you're aware of the criticisms that people have of you and the degree to which you have a great deal of strength. Like, for example, your passive Cult of Destiny. Obviously, as fans of cult-based and stuff like that, it's like, okay. Jordan Peterson, surely not immune from that criticism. I don't think anyone of any level of, notoriety is immune to that criticism. But the point I was making is and I'm curious if you think this is true, you canvassed for was it Ossoff and Warnock? Was it both of them? Or
in Georgia. Yeah. Originally it was just Ossoff because I didn't want to do Warnock because I don't like black people. But then I was like, fuck, I should probably do both. So yeah.
This is good comedy.
Thank you.
So I don't recall, I didn't follow it too much, but it was a razor thin runoff. It was a runoff. So naturally it had to be razor thin. And you did a bunch of canvassing down there.
Yeah.
So what do you think is the probability that you single-handedly flipped those seats for the Democrats, which then in turn flipped the entire Senate for the Democrats?
I think we had a guy that went through and did a numbers analysis, and I don't think it was close enough for that to have been the case. I think that we definitely impacted the districts that we canvassed in. It seemed like we did. But I think that even though it was close, I don't think it was close enough that I could say that like, oh yeah, I think we single-handedly were the reason why we won this.
Well, that's why I put single-handedly. Obviously, nothing can be single-handedly.
Sure.
But
or what I mean is that like absent our efforts, looking mathematically at the votes that possibly we affected through our canvassing, if you removed all of those, I think they both would have still won.
Well, obviously, that's fair. You can't know that for sure, right? So
Well, what I'm saying, okay, so let me, to be more precise.
Probabilistically.
Well,
what is the percent chance that you made a fundamental difference? Like 5%?
What I'm saying is that I think we
0?
compared like the districts before and after the runoff and the areas that we canvassed in to see how many votes more we think we got based on our canvassing efforts. In the areas that we canvassed, we removed all the extra votes that we think might have been attributed to our campaigning based off of the prior results. Even with those removed, I think they still would have won. That's what I mean when I say I don't think that we affected the outcome. But I mean, it's possible it could have been more significantly swayed one direction or another. But
that's what I'm saying. What is the probability, if you had to put a percentage, the probability that you made?
That we were that absent us, we would have lost,
or like 10%?
I would say easily under 5,
to
probably under 1 or 2% would be my guess.
Okay, which still having a one out of 100 chance to affect the entire political structure of the United States is not insignificant.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess just more broadly on that, do you plan on doing more? I mean, you did canvassing recently. If you didn't think it would, would you say it was a success?
Yeah, for sure. But you don't always know. I don't always know like the impact. This is a retrospective, right? Like,
yeah,
I can't know prospectively if this would be the difference or not. Yeah.
Is your plan to do more canvassing on like tough elections? I know you did
probably, yeah,
in Ohio or something.
Yeah. Got a couple events coming up. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's admirable. But that's my point about, cult of destiny. Rally your followers to go actually make a tangible difference in the world.
Yeah.
And so the Dr. Destiny, Mr. Borelli thing. It's like, it's a fairly straightforward question.
Okay.
Are you aware of the degree to which you undermine your own goals?
Probably not. But I think that there is a little bit of begging the question, I would imagine here.
What are your goals?
Yeah, exactly. Because typically when people say you're undermining your own goals, that usually means more that their perception of what my goals are is probably different than my perception of what my goals are. So they view me as undermining what they think my goals are rather than me undermining what I think my actual goals are. I think there are times where I undermine my goals for sure.
Yeah.
But sometimes I don't think it's when other people say like, oh, you're ruining yourself this way. I'm like, I don't think so. Maybe something that you would want, but not something that I'm looking for.
That's fair. Well, that's probably what you just described is probably the camp I fall in, my perception of your goals. Because the way I see it, the point of that joke was Dr. Destiny. In Dr. Destiny mode, I mean, you are these are, I would say, objectively true.
Oh, objectively, okay.
Sorry,
go ahead.
To the same degree that Jordan Peterson is objectively one of the best philosophers of all time.
Gotcha.
Maybe transjectively true, let's say.
Transjectively true, okay.
Clearly one of the most intelligent people on this platform. You're capable of extreme empathy. You are able to have basically any conversation with anyone, which I think, like, for example, obviously this all went sideways, but like your conversations with Nick Fuentes, had they been able to continue and, whatever, all kinds of things went wrong with that were sort of outside of your control. It's like, I would say those are objectively good. Those are objectively good de-radicalizing conversations that bring people back from the edge. You're on the left. I think you fulfill an important role of stopping people who would otherwise be in like Hassan's camp from going to Hassan's camp, right? Because you can clearly state like, of course, I'm not for banning the ability of transgender people to get the surgery or whatnot, but that doesn't mean I'm now a socialist or whatever, right? So you fulfill an important function, and at your best, you are a very useful tool for many people in figuring out the truth. My background, for what it's worth, I was a big fan of Jordan Peterson.
Noticed, yeah.
Yeah, as you can tell.
Yeah.
To the point where I would say, unironically, I literally don't disagree with him on anything, because the things that he would be wrong about, he himself acknowledges and he qualifies, and he's like, well, I don't know if this is true, but blah, blah, blah. So I was like, he's literally 100% right. There's almost nothing I disagree with him on. I see now in hindsight the limitations of that.
Sure. I mean, I feel like, broadly speaking, pre like C16 stuff, I think I would probably agree. I don't know if I've seen anything of his where I'm like, oh, he's super wrong. Generally, he would match his conviction with the statements he was making, usually.
You didn't see anything where he was super wrong? How about when you talked to him and he said...
I said prior to C16, the whole Bill C16 shit before that. After that, I think he's off. And
I think... Okay, well, I would say Daily Wire is the key.
Sure, okay, yeah.
The Kathy Newman interview was post Bill C16, and Kathy Newman interview is Peterson at its best, in my opinion.
Okay,
but anyway, my point
I disagree, but go ahead, yeah.
That's fair. Well, we can get into that. But like, my point is you talking to him and then having him say, what did he say? Well, there's 20% excess deaths in Europe. It's like, okay, and you can just say qualitatively that this is because of the vaccine. He's like, well, what do you think it is? It's like the whole Kathy Newman interview, his famous line, or one of the lines was like, you never do a univariate analysis when you're talking about like the gender pay gap.
Yeah.
It's like you just did a univariate analysis. How embarrassing, how cringe univariate analysis. And it's like, well, okay, you're very good at, pushing back and getting people to, what do you call it? Prove that they don't know what they're talking about. And like the other one, the Twitter files debate. I think you were doing some end of the year like recap.
Sure.
And it was like, I think your audience like votes on best meme, best debate or something like that. The best meme was the one it was the Joker with Nick Fuentes voiceover, and it's like Destiny says the N-word. I like that. You're gonna love me. Epic.
That was a good meme. Yeah.
But anyway, one of the top debate was like the Twitter files debate. And I never read the Twitter files, obviously. And I was like, okay, wait a second. What do I think about the Twitter files right now? My thing is like, well, basically the Biden administration used the intelligence agencies included with Twitter to censor people and all that stuff. And like right off the bat, like 15 minutes in the debate, it was pointed out the Trump administration made requests. I was like, oh, okay. I didn't know that. I would have thought this was in the Biden administration only. And so I was like, all right, I'm glad I'm not going to read the Twitter files. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take the person who I trust to give the best opposition argument to a perspective I already agree with. I'll just watch them duke it out, and then I'll observe the conversation. Just go, oh, he seems right on that. He seems wrong on that. And like when it got to the Hunter Biden laptop thing, you kind of gave a hypothetical steel man of the intelligence agencies, and I was like, yeah, I don't find that very compelling. So I'm more certain now that the FBI engaged in manipulative behavior to censor the Hunter Biden laptop story or whatnot. But like both of those things get derived from just watching you go at your best.
Okay.
That's Dr. Destiny. And then Mr. Borelli. Mr. Borelli it seems like Mr. Borelli undermines Dr. Destiny to a significant degree. Right? Like there's a lot of people who would listen to you and who I would want to listen to you who don't, because you say, I think, stuff that even you would acknowledge is like insane and sociopathic and less than moral.
Okay.
Would you agree with that?
Would I agree with the statement that there are some people that would listen to me if I didn't say some things? Yeah, some people would otherwise listen to me, but don't because of rhetoric I engage in. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely, yeah.
That's a very different framing of how I framed it. I'm specifically pointing at the whole meme of the Mr. Borelli it's insane. Like some of the crazy shit. Like the firefighter. Whatever. It's like, okay. First off, what would I say? I've talked to Vosh. I talked to Andrew Wilson. I'm sure I'll have the misfortune of talking to Nick Fuentes at some point. I'm less interested in policing rhetoric as trying to genuinely understand when you're on the Bridges podcast and you say to JJ McCullough or Mr. Beat, the problem is the temperature is turned up too much. Conservatives and progressives have a caricature of one another. And there's a very large middle ground of reasonable people who could, come together on solve important issues. That's almost verbatim what you say. And then it's like, okay, then you say the shit about the firefighter. I don't know which Destiny form I'm talking to often or watching. It's like, is your goal to bridge the gap? Do you believe that conservatives are caricatured and that's a problem? Or do you think that if they go to a Trump rally, they deserve what they get?
Deserve no sympathy.
Well, but you can.
No, I
surely you understand from my perception, how it's hard to square those two.
Yeah, I understand. So I think this is the challenge in doing what I do, where I'm trying to be relatively politically, ideologically independent in how I operate, meaning I'm not just trying to talk to only liberals or only progressives or only people that agree with me. I'm trying to talk to people that disagree with me. There's a special challenge there in weighing how combative do I want to be versus how not accepting, not charitable, how oh fuck, there's a word I'm looking for. It's not empathetic. Do I want to be combative or do I want to be a bit more
charitable?
People are saying tolerant. Fuck. Maybe agreeable. There's a strength to both approaches, and there's a big negative to both approaches, and I have to constantly reinterpret and reweigh these things as like time passes to see if I am effecting some kind of outcome that I think is good. And there are big moments sometimes where I think I don't like the direction I've headed and I need a violent course correction because I haven't been calibrating correctly, leading up to something. Yeah, that's, I would say. I would say that like an analogy for this might be, have you ever heard of the idea of like parents that let their teenage children drink in the basement? The idea that like, well, I don't really want my kid to drink, but if he's going to drink, like, fuck it, do it at my house. You're not up to no good, right?
I was friends with people whose parents were like that, much to my benefit.
Yeah. On its face, like we can understand that parent is having a Mr. Borelli versus Dr. Destiny moment where I don't want my children to drink or be up to no good, but like I'm going to condone underage drinking because I think that the benefit of doing it in this way outweighs not doing it. But we can imagine so many things along that spectrum that would be insane, right? That somebody might say like, oh yeah, well, if my kids are going to drink, I'd rather at least have them fucking drink here. And you're like, oh, okay, fine. And then you walk downstairs and you see that like the parents have like a fully staffed fucking bar with like a bartender.
Cocaine and hookers and shit.
Yeah, maybe they bring in some cocaine. And you're like, okay, wait a second, hold on. This is way too much, right? And then you can imagine a world where yeah, somebody gets, intoxicated too much for the first time, they throw up, but it was like in the parents' basement, and they're like, hey, this is why you shouldn't do this shit. Like I told you guys, like you fucking like this is whatever, right? Where they're it's like more managed or whatever, right? We can see all of that on the spectrum. And yeah, the way that I engage with people is somewhere on that spectrum. Where in a perfect world, when I'm talking to somebody like a Jordan Peterson, what I really want to do is on every single statement you make, this is so fucking stupid. And we're going to break down exactly why it's stupid. And you need to justify every single premise here before we get to your conclusion, because all of them are wrong, right? But if I'm that combative, right? If I'm the parent that says, if I even see you take a sip of alcohol around me, you're out of here, okay? I don't care if you got to be a ward of the state or what, get the fuck out of my house, right? That hardcore approach, might work in certain environments, but for the vast majority of environments, it turns everybody off, right? You're like, okay, well, Jesus. Okay, well, that's Destiny. He's the crazy, insane debate lord. But then on the other end of the spectrum, where I'm like, oh, okay, 20% excess deaths, all because of the vaccine. Okay, I mean, that seems pretty high, but okay, well, let's go to the next thing, right? Is like the parents that are like, okay, I guess if you want to do, cocaine and maybe some downer, maybe you want to do some heroin. Yeah.
I get the analogy. So
it's trying to balance that out. And, one of the things that I've noticed, and it happened, I saw it a lot after the Trump, I don't want to say assassination attempt because no one was charged with assassination, so it couldn't have been that. But in the firefighter shooter event, okay, when that happened, and then I started to see all of the conservatives become so indignant online about how inflammatory the rhetoric was, I retroactively perceive all of my participation in this space and like my conversation with these figures as me like playing a role in that. Where I don't like the idea that that Peterson, that Shapiro, that Owens can say like, oh, well, I debated Destiny, blah. No, you didn't. We didn't have a fucking debate. Okay, I showed up in a schoolgirl skirt and we played hopscotch for 2 hours. And I hate that I'm like, I shouldn't have been a part of normalizing this so much. And now we're going to go a little bit more to the other end because this shouldn't be normalized and we're going to be somewhat unhinged here. Yeah, go. I'll let you go in. I can talk about.
Well, I mean, I get that analogy. There's a part. I mean, first off, I'm very empathetic to most people on everything in many ways.
Okay. What a saint.
Well, like, I know. Saint must die before the end. Like when you said, Piers Morgan said, do you condemn the shooter? And you're like, in front of these people? No. And everyone's like, oh my God, that's wild. I'm like, Dave Rubin's on the screen. Hammer Time Dave Rubin. And then he's like rolling his, it's like, however degenerate and immoral you are, Dave Rubin is at least as degenerate and immoral if he's going to make jokes like that.
Yeah.
And so the whole like, well, not in front of these people, it's like, you know, and it's ironic because Piers Morgan, the meme around him is like, do you condemn Hamas? It's like, well, the truth is not only do I condemn Hamas, I think that the just thing would be every Hamas terrorist that killed civilians on October 7th should be thrown in a pit and lit on fire. But if an Israeli settler is saying, do you condemn Hamas? I'm far less inclined to say, and it's
There's
like,
going to be some heavy qualifications there. Abso-fucking-lutely, yeah. If I'm in front of settlers and they're giving me that line, well, don't you condemn Hamas? And yeah, well, okay, sure, but we're going to talk about the settlements and everything too, because I need to hear something from you. Absolutely,
So this is my point is, for better or worse, I'm empathetic to that approach, and I guess I don't know. I'm not. It seems to me, I'll just show my cards and be as honest as possible.
Yeah.
Like, it seems so obvious that because you talk about like correction, I need to go too far. The analogy you gave is like, well, you can have parents that let their kids drink. Like, Jesus Christ, bringing the cocaine and the hookers in. That's insane. It's like, of course, that's self-evidently insane. I would say it's self-evidently insane to mock the firefighter who died. And it's like, but then it's just me saying this and you saying that, and I guess I don't really know what the purpose of that is other than to point that out. Because it just seems to me like there has to be a part of you that knows that that's not optimal, even for what you said about having to course correct and all that. Like, surely you can overcorrect. Like, would you agree that that was an overcorrection?
It's definitely stronger than anything that I would think would exist, like, ideally. That's one way to say it. That is one way to say it. Have you seen the video of like the old, I think this was in black and white, maybe it was in the 70s or whatever, the woman that goes around pinching guys' asses on camera and then asks them like, how did that feel? Do you know what I'm talking about? Oh, fuck. There's okay, well, take my word that I'm not stating this video with ill intent or misrepresenting it.
It doesn't sound like something someone could make up on the spot. I won't lie.
Yeah. It was an old video in 1971. Sent Nikki Wood to go and pinch. So what she did was she walked around and she was pinching people. Fuck. Wait. Hold on. Give me one. Oh, wait, never mind. So she walked around and she was pinching men's bottoms. Okay. Here, you can actually, you know what? Let me send this to you, just real quick. You can watch like 10 seconds of this and immediately understand what's going on.
Okay. Are you sending me this on Discord or?
Yeah. Where else would I send it to? Where else do we communicate on?
That's fair. You were full screen.
Oh, okay. My bad. Okay.
Nice.
Yeah, you get it, right?
I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. So like we would say here, like pretty obviously the woman is committing sexual assault, right? She is. Right? Walk around, you pinch somebody in the ass, right? Just...
This goes into the whole definitions thing. It's like we could label it that, but then that seems to.
Or we could say sexual harassment if you want, or whatever. Some sort of like sexual harassment. It's sexual in nature, it's harassment. We don't have to call it subject. But like obviously it's not good. We should never have people doing this ever. Right. But she's proving a point, I think. I think it's a good point. I think it's good to be aware of this. I think it's good to have a situation like this where you're seeing it from the other end, where somebody's doing something to you and you're like, okay, I actually really don't like this. And I don't like seeing it. And this doesn't make me feel good. One thing that's hard for people, I think, to understand sometimes, hard to intellectualize or articulate, because I think everybody understands it intuitively, is negative and disgusting and immoral rhetoric is actually really powerful. It's a really strong motivator. When you dehumanize somebody and you do stuff like this, you're not doing this because you want to be the bad guy or evil. You do it because when you dehumanize people, you can attack them so much more. You can be so much more brutal. You get everybody on your side riled up. You see them as the enemy, the Amalek, right? You can go so much harder on somebody. And what I got super disgusted with on the during the shooting when the firefighter died was all of a sudden there were these huge calls to compassion from the conservative side for who was, for all intents and purposes, like a conservative loony. This guy tweeted out some unhinged crazy shit. This guy was sitting at a fucking Trump rally, not sitting, standing, recording it. Like, this is one of Trump's ardent fans. That when we're supposed to have so much compassion for this guy, and liberals are always supposed to be tripping over themselves, being compassionate, being apologetic, which is a detriment to our side. It makes us look bad. Like, okay, yeah, fuck, we fucked up. Our rhetoric went too far. Like, it was too unhinged. We're sorry. We shouldn't have called you guys Nazis. Like, yeah, we're sorry. And the conservatives are getting to collect all this value and virtue. Like, yeah, you guys did fuck up. You should feel bad for this. Fuck you that this happened, right? And then immediately the next day, it's like, oh, they're commies, they're, the trans groomers, the conservatives get to benefit from all this dehumanizing rhetoric. It's like, no, hold on. Fuck you. Okay. If we're going to make it a gunfight, then at some point I'm going to bring a gun. And I'm not going to keep showing up with a knife because this is bullshit. You guys can't collect this much value off of your dehumanization and expect us to never, ever, ever do it. It doesn't make sense. We're just destroying ourselves doing this the entire time. Like, we'll start to engage in similar behavior. So this is my thought process on when the Trump shooting happens, right? That whatever statements that I made about the firefighter dude that got shot up, I don't think they approached the level of disgustingness that of any of the people that argued against me about what they said about Paul Pelosi. Now, Paul didn't die, I guess, so maybe you can argue that, well, mine are worse because the dude died. But there were a lot of jokes made about that. So yeah, as soon as I saw that, I was like,
yeah, well, that's my point about why I don't hold it against you that you didn't condemn it in front of them, because I think Dave Rubin is pathetic, and I'll leave it at that for that reason. Something about, it's like, and the videos of Paul Pelosi lying on the ground and like when he was like snorting or whatever because he couldn't breathe because he got hit in the brain.
Okay.
Like, oh, you're joking about that?
Okay, I haven't even seen those.
You didn't
videos.
see that?
Nope. Holy shit. Okay, I probably would have been even more unhinged then.
Well, I believe that's. I have to. Well, if you haven't seen it now, I'm suddenly worried that those are not the accurate videos.
Well, no, I only read like articles and stuff about it. That's why I didn't go looking for any.
I believe the video, like when the 911 call, isn't it the 911 call? He shows up to the house, he like opens the door and he's kind of like talking kind of calmly because he's trying to keep the guy calm.
Yeah, because the guy's still there, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And then Paul Pelosi's on the ground like snorting because he got hit in the head and it's like fucking up his ability to breathe. And Dave Rubin says hammer time. So it's like, spare me, Dave Rubin and crew. I understand that.
Yeah. Maybe I did I might have watched this video, but it was a long time ago, so I don't remember. So fuck.
That's fair. I guess. What is your? First off, the thing that I'm aware of in this conversation is it's really only the first time we've conversed. So I don't feel I've earned enough trust per se to go too deep into disputes right now, but just broadly, what are your goals with what you do on this channel in life? Like, because like I said, it seems to me the online political sphere is rapidly growing. I don't think anyone would dispute that. The biggest issue is that there is a big gap between online political influence and tangible political power. Now, you've attempted to bridge that gap with the canvassing efforts. And, I think like these progressive victory type PACs that try to bridge it, the Bridges podcast and all that is an attempt to be more mainstream and all that. So how do you see?
Yeah. Because
you're like the biggest figure in this space. So I'm curious.
There's multiple levels of, there's multiple layers or levels of what's going on. So first level, the thing that I think I care the most about is people committing to some like good epistemic practice, because I think that everything, epistemology,
anti-intellectualism is based.
I'm sorry, but now I'll be more serious. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Good epistemic practice. I want people to understand, like, how do you read a thing how do you develop some level of information or knowledge? And then how do you deploy this knowledge in a conversation in a way that's meaningful, that engages with and intersects with, another person's arguments and like come to some kind of like rational, logical conclusions. Not rational, logical, like, oh, I'm logical or rational, but as in like inductively, deductively, abductively, everything we're saying like comports with reality. It makes sense and it's structured well. That's my number one thing. That's my first big thing. Which is why a lot of my stream is in like informing and constructing arguments and doing research and reading and evaluating like what's a good source, what's a bad source, like what do we trust, what don't we trust, what kind of like pre-existing knowledge do we need to evaluate it, all this boring dumb shit, right? That's number one. Number two, kind of the layer that sits on top of that, that's probably, I guess in a way I'm kind of more known for it, I guess it depends on what arena you're in, is arguing the applied level of like the epistemic background is like, well, I've got certain political beliefs that I think are really important, and I want more people to believe those political beliefs. I think it's important that we, trade with the rest of the world, that we defend Ukraine against Russia, that we, do more to ensure equal rights and opportunities and access to things for people in the United States, right? Those are the applied things from my epistemic explorations, I guess, yeah. So those are like the two big kind of things that I try to do.
Okay, that's very interesting because you said the first thing is you care about people having a solid epistemic. That's like your number one concern.
Yes,
is the proper epistemic approach. So you don't even necessarily. It's not necessarily in your long-term goals to translate like talking about politics to political operations per se.
I mean, like, if I want more people,
or is it for sure that's in your roadmap at some point?
It kind of is, yeah. I mean, for the canvassing and everything else, for the podcast we're doing and everything else, yeah, I'm trying to get more into the world for that. But it's, I don't know if that's where my main strengths lie. And personally, it's not even like my main, like, interests. Like,
okay,
if right now somebody presented me, like, we have another reality that you can step into where you immediately stop this and become the governor of California, I don't think I would do it. I think I'd rather stay here. Like president of the United States, I would absolutely do that. You wouldn't want to be the governor of California? I'm sorry. Well, governor would be pretty cool, though.
Of California? That shithole state?
My God.
No, thank you.
Okay. What about Florida?
That's a utopia. That's a freedom-loving utopia.
Okay.
Okay, so it's interesting. You said the thing you fundamentally care most about is getting people to have an epistemically solid framework.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess, honestly, the reason I do not talk that much or care that much really about like play-by-play politics is not because I think it's insignificant. That's the opposite of the true. Arguably, it's more important than the underlying philosophy because that's how it actually manifests, right? It's like the reason you care about epistemics is because it has practical implications.
Sure. Half agree to that, but not fully, but only because my only objection to that would be, I would say solid epistemics are more important than the applied level because solid epistemic foundation can predict future applied levels. So we kind of agree or kind of disagree, right? Somebody might accidentally wind up with the right decision one time, but with a bad epistemic foundation, they'll end up with bad applied positions later on. So I would say being wrong on something is less important than having a good thought process because you're more likely to be correct in the future. But
sure.
Okay.
Sure. It's all in the framework though of you want people to do good things ultimately.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah.
So I would say that that's my fundamental concern. The actually in the whole video that you watched prior, the Jordan Peterson Destiny overlap, where I concluded that you were probably autistic, which is in many ways
based
a projection of myself, I'm sure. Otherwise, who would make a 17-minute video comparing Destiny and Jordan Peterson's underlying philosophy?
True.
Okay, so let's get into that, I guess. So that's the thing you're interested in most. So I'm thinking of something that I will say later, but I'm not going to say it yet.
Okay, write it down.
It's been on my mind.
Oh shit. Okay.
Don't worry.
All right.
So then is your number one interest like epistemic philosophy, or like how do you? So you say it's important to have your epistemic grounding, your fundamental epistemic grounding properly. Okay, what does that look like to you?
Basically, when somebody pushes somebody on, well, how do you arrive at your beliefs? You're able to speak with more substance than to just say, like, I read a variety of sources and I try to have a lot of critical thinking and common sense. So ideally, it's somebody who can say, well, what?
If someone said that to me, I'd be like, fucking base.
Okay, yeah. But then I would say, well, that's meaningless, right? Like two people can say like, oh, I have like really strong common sense. That's why I think 14-year-olds and their parents should be able to discuss with their doctor if they should take trans drugs. And the other guy should be able to, and the other guy will say, oh, well, I have common sense. I know that kids should never be taking trans drugs. Like, oh, wow. Well, seems like common sense isn't doing the same thing here for both people. I feel like common sense is a replacement for, it's like self-evident, like very applied belief where people are treating
intuition.
Kind of, yeah, sure, maybe, yeah.
What is the role of intuition in truth stuff? Because I'm trying to remember exactly some of your reactions to some of the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because on the one hand, and you yourself said there's this problem of people getting into the hyper autistic, like, well, what do you mean by this and that? Which, by the way, I would say, and I know Andrew Wilson from a few years back now, your guys' debate was exactly that of just like, this is just pure semantic. Like, what is the definition of insurrection? Like, well, is a state an insurrection? And it's just like, you start drilling into the semantics of it that you lose the frame of like, what does it matter that whether or not it is an insurrection? What's the significance of that? And it's breaking the frame from the semantic to why do we even care what the semantic truth is? Yeah. And eventually you get far enough where it's just intuition of like, I guess I believe that our culture puts way too much emphasis on truth equals logical consistency, truth equals propositional logic, and what Peter's there's a clip from Peterson where he says in that video, I think atheists and scientific materialists have the same problem, and this is what I think it's hitting on. It's like the presuppositionalists who I know you're a massive fan of.
Always.
The one trick ponies of League of Politics, presuppositionalists. Every argument is,
what is your ultimate source of truth?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, unless, and then it boils down to,
how do you know that?
Well, yeah, and if you don't accept the Eastern Orthodox interpretation of God, you cannot make the claim that pain is bad. It's like, okay, it's just whatever. Mm-hmm. But that's them from the hyper universalist moral objective side, saying logical consistency. Well, a life begins at the moment of conception because that's the only logical place we can define it. It's like, that's the continuum fallacy. It's like at some point red shades into orange, but where exactly it becomes orange it's a continuum. But I don't have to know exactly where red shades into orange to be able to point out that red is not orange, right? I don't need to be able to tell you exactly when life begins or consciousness is conferred on a human being and it gets rights for me to say it definitely isn't the moment a sperm fertilizes an egg, because there's absolutely no, it's an unarticulated intuition.
Sure.
And then people will say, well, that's bullshit. And I would say almost everything we know and understand is from unarticulated intuitions. And it's built into the basis of our legal code. The reasonable person standard, when you drill down to it, is completely undefined. Well, what is a reasonable person?
What a reasonable person would think in it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, what is a reasonable person? I believe I think it's still the case. The definition of pornography it still defers to, I don't know what it is, but I know it when I see it. It's like that's an indication that your intuitions are able to know things that you cannot put words to. And people like Jordan Peterson, Ian McGilchrist, they hammer this home. And that's why I think a lot of the logical arguments, it's like, I don't believe that I am going to convince people so much through logical argumentation. I think people who are more amenable to logical argumentation, like you and your audience perhaps, like the memes, the League of Politics champion spotlights, those are not logical tools. And yet, I think they make my point, they illustrate my points, like Vosh talking about the postmodern point. What did he say? Many things for lakes and rivers. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so that's mainly how people determine what's true or not. Is like, well, does it intuitively, if it can be mocked so easily, then it doesn't matter how logically, propositionally consistent it is. Okay. And that's a whole big spiel on, I guess, because I also, like I said, I care fundamentally about the same thing. Mm-hmm. How do we know what's true or whatnot? And I guess I don't know, because you certainly clearly you're funny enough often, and you're good at memery, and your Twitter feed is, S tier memery, which was also captured in the Champion Spotlight.
Thank you.
Touch of irony. And that's exactly my point, is like, I think, whether you know it explicitly or not, like that is often a better way to get people to ground their epistemics in some sense.
Well, it's a good way to convince people to believe in like certain applied positions, but not always a good way to bring people along epistemically. And so I could get in trouble later on if I try to make a point about a thing. And because people followed me in one sense intuitively, one way, now people are following me incorrectly in another way, or they can't follow me in another way. Let's say that I say that to figure out, if you square something, what you're really doing is you're taking the thing and then you're adding 2 to it. Okay, that's how you square something. So for the purpose of this argument, right, like 2 squared is 4, because 2 plus 2 is 4. Okay, 2 is a base number, you square it, so you add 2, so it's 4, right? Okay, cool, it works. But then if we get into some debate in the future where somebody wants to argue with me, and now we're talking about, 3 squared or 10 squared, well, now we're super off. It doesn't work anymore. We've fucked ourselves completely. So I might have given some bad explanation, or somebody would have followed me with some bad process, but in the applied area, we end up at the same spot. We're like, oh, okay, everything's good. But then for future things, there's going to be huge divergences in the community. This is one of the reasons also why I pretty intentionally like engage like very with like a lot of we can say like edgy humor or stuff like that, is because I always want to make sure that my community expectations of like my behavior and who I am are matching, who I am as closely as possible. I don't want there to be some huge divergence in the future where someone's like, wait, holy shit, this guy's edgy, or oh my god, this guy thinks that like racial humor is funny or whatever. It's like, no, yeah, I'm going to remind you to keep you on point pretty aggressively.
I do something similar. My all time is called reason is probably autistic.
Your mic disconnected for a second. Say that one more time.
Hello. See 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. It was when you were moving. Go ahead.
I said I do the same thing, and one of my best videos of all time is called "Why Everyone Who Disagrees with Me is Probably Autistic."
Okay.
So my goal is to forfeit immediately, like, hey, if you think this is some clean cut, well, we're going to talk some philosophy here, and Jordan Peterson's thesis. It's like, no, that's the opposite. I think you're in that analogy you just made about like, what is it, squaring equals +2? It's like,
yeah,
if someone is funny, if someone has a good eye for memery, they demonstrate it repeatedly, which would be the opposite of what you just said. Like,
sure. Well, what I'm saying is like
someone can toss out a random joke or say something in a very odd way that people find funny. That happens often. People say something and they're like,
sure. I mean, like, so what I would say is that like, so I joke very irreverently about a lot of things, and sometimes people will come. They'll fall into my fandom during a particular arc, and it might be, say, an Israeli watching me rail on Palestinians and making a lot of jokes about, the Gaza Strip looks like a New York strip, steak, they're cooked, etc., stuff like that, and think it's really funny. And they're like, I like this guy. He's a funny dude. He memes well. Like, everything's cool here. But then as soon as I start making jokes about Israelis, now all of a sudden they lose their fucking mind, right? So they followed me because they saw one thing, they thought one joke, one particular type of thing was good. But now when I've moved to something different, using what I would consider to be the same type of thought process, but they're not using the same thought process, they just like the applied level. Now when I move to something different, now they're like mortally offended. This is why I focus on process more than just the applied stuff, because if I use only jokes or only humor or only rhetoric and I don't focus on any of the like process, then I don't train any of my audience to follow me along to different things. I'm just like collecting people that agree with my opinions on things. And ideally, I would want people that would agree with my process and that might disagree with some opinions, or would come to me and rely on, oh, when I go watch Destiny, today I'm going to get a take that is Stephen Bunnell's take on a thing, not just what progressives think, not just what conservatives think, but this guy who has a way of processing things and then gives me a particular thing. That's why I like to fixate on the process more. Understanding, obviously, there are some people that just agree with what I say because I either already share their opinions or they're, center left, broad left, and they're like, yeah, okay, fuck it, this guy's right, sometimes wrong, other times, but I like him or he's funny or whatever. But yeah.
All that makes sense. Do you I can't say anti-intellectualism is base and then try to ask you these unironically. But are you interested in philosophy? Like when you sift through Wikipedia, what are the things that you find most compelling? Because it seems like if I'm just looking at proportion of time spent, it's a lot of, you know, who said what on what day and what email in what, you know, Twitter DM on January 6th, you know, so on and so forth. What draws your like what areas draw your interest the most? Because you said you're most interested in epistemic grounding, so I would assume like it was surprising to me that when you were watching my video and you said, "Holy crap! Like Peterson's about to say something incredibly insightful. Where was this guy?" And I'm like, "That's the Jordan Peterson Sam Harris conversation. That's the like I assume that you know anyone who is like into epistemology fundamentally would have." Well, maybe not watched it 4 times, but like certainly would be aware of that fundamental dynamic. I regard the debate between Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris, the Pangburn one, as like the forefront of philosophical.
Sure. Is this where Harris has this very unfortunate assumption that he solved moral philosophy and the bridge of the is-ought gap by just vaguely alluding to some broad moral landscape? Was that the one where Peterson challenged him on that, or was this a different discussion?
Yeah, well, Sam Harris's moral philosophy is, I think he says he can solve the is-ought gap.
Yeah, by broadly alluding to some, moral landscape that.
Well, ironically, the reason that was so interesting is because it's not a debate per se, and like he's wrong, he's right. It's like they're both trying to circle around like what's true.
No, they are. Yeah, I think I watched this a long time ago, and I think I broadly agreed with Peterson on this because I broadly disagree with Harris's moral philosophy here, and Peterson seemed to be very. Right. The thing is that the difference is that when I listened to Peterson back then, I feel like I can feel this out very quickly. I think everybody can feel it out very quickly. When somebody's talking, you can tell one of the best human traits is curiosity. And when I listened to Peterson talk prior to the political brain rot, he just came off as a very intensely curious person. Like every opinion that he had, every question that he asked, like it seemed like there was a conflicted, troubled mind that was constantly fighting towards some closer to true statement than what the mind held before. Like, well, I don't know. Could I do this particular thing? Could you be a Nazi? Could you, is this something like, but the questions weren't just these rhetorical, political dunking questions. They seemed like genuinely good faith, insightful questions. And I feel like if I remember, it's been a long time since I watched it, but like the conversation with Peterson and Harris, I think was pretty similar. He felt like that in the past, but now he's a lunatic, but yeah.
Yeah, now he's getting dinner with Benjamin Netanyahu,
Based.
who is objectively, of course, the best and has done no wrong and is certainly God's most chosen of his chosen people.
Absolutely.
Okay, let me ask you this question. How do we appeal to the Candace Owens crowd? How do you, not even appeal to, that's the wrong question. How do you solve the problem that is the negative side of populism?
I think that
there's definitely a positive side of populism, in my opinion.
I think that you have to, there's a lot of different ways. Different people have different roles in that. So for instance, if it's your like, so like if it's your child or a parent or like a sibling or a friend, right? Maybe the way that you do it is by very slowly over time introducing them to, thoughts, ideas, people, certain events where it's like, hey, like, well, let's watch this or look at this. Like, oh, look, like the person that wrote the script for this movie was like a crazy feminist, but like it was pretty funny, right? Didn't we like this? Or hey, like maybe like a slow over time type of pressure, can kind of change people's thoughts, their opinions, their minds on things, right? From an activist perspective, there are different types of activists. People like who's the black guy? Fuck me, the black dude that talks to the KKK people.
Daryl Davis.
Yeah, Daryl Davis. So
he's a hero. Enlightened Centrism.
Yeah, so he's a hardcore empathy approacher, right? Yep. This is a guy that goes, I'm going to talk to you, I'm going to make you, enjoy it, whatever. And then you got people that do kind of like the mockery angle, but they do it comedically, right? I would say like your Jon Stewart's, maybe your Stephen Colbert's, at least when you're like about a show, but like you're like your Jon Stewart's and stuff like that. I think everybody's got like a different role to play, and there's different ways to reach different people. So there's not like a one size fits all for the situation or the person doing it, right? Like if I'm debating a person, there 100%. Are, even for the same person, there are multiple approaches that I could take that would appeal to different ranges of that person's audience. If I'm arguing with, like, let's say that I'm arguing with a conservative parent and I'm arguing trans issues, right? Like I could come at it from we could come at it from like a personal empathy thing where it's like, hey, like if your child had a disease, like would you really want the government, having conversations with you or outlawing what your doctor's allowed to prescribe? Like, wouldn't that be really scary? Like I might go at it from that angle, or it could be from like a philosophical government angle, right? Where you're like, yeah, trans shit is really crazy. I agree. But a lot of lefties think gun shit is crazy. Like, isn't it better for the government to just fuck off from all these things and let us, as people, free people figuring it out from a, liberalism perspective? Or you could go at it from like, fuck the empathy, fuck the philosophy. You could go at it from a really brutal point of view. Like, oh, you think that the trans youth stuff isn't valid? Okay, well, how do you answer the fact that there are 3 huge meta-analyses that show these outcomes and blah, blah, blah? Have you even read the fucking research, right? Where it's like, ooh, shit. The person watching is like, ooh, my content creator looks kind of dumb right now. It makes me feel uncomfortable, right? All of these are like valid and that all of them will have varying levels of success. But like, it just, it's such a variable thing, right? We're at the end of the day, we're asking like, how do you persuade a person? And there's like so many answers depending on the situations for that. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. That all of that is 100% true. And that's on the rhetoric side of like, what is the way that you communicate things? And I suppose you could say that includes the content, like you were saying, like, well, let's approach it from do we want the government doing this? That's like sort of a different idea. But like fundamentally, I believe that the way that you defeat my number one concern, I don't know about number one. Well, one of my concerns.
Top concerns, okay.
Yeah, one of my top concerns. Although I think Terrence Howard proved that you can have multiple number ones or something like that. 1 × 1 is 2. So I've multiple number one concerns.
Base scientist guy, yeah.
Yes. And one of them is extremism on the far right and far left. It is a very brave take to say that both the far left and far right are insane.
Yeah.
And I'm a brave...
It's a meaningless statement, but yeah.
Person. Okay, why do you say it's meaningless?
Begs the question of what is far right and what is far left.
Sure. What?
Yeah.
Every word, like you said, begs the question. Eventually we get down to semantics of like, well, what do you mean by this, and that, or whatever. I think...
Sure, but what I'm saying is that I think that statement is tautologically true, such that when somebody says, well, what do you think is the problem? And you say, usually when far is a descriptor of a political ideology, there's a normativity baked into the word far of bad. So when somebody says the far left and the far right are problematic, what you're really saying is like the bad left and the bad right are problematic. What you're really saying is like the bad and the bad are problematic. And by problematic, you mean bad. So you're saying bad is bad. It's like, wow. Okay. Insightful.
I think that if you, I think you're abstracting it too far away from the practicality of it.
I don't think so. I think it's perfect.
Well, I can give you the far. Well,
like if somebody were to answer, what do you think of the problems? And you would say, well, go ahead.
Okay, sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
If somebody were to say, what are the problems? And instead of saying far left and far right, if somebody says, I think that there is a huge issue with the far left and the far right, where the far left are people that don't have enough respect for things enshrined in the Bill of Rights, and they want the government to be too much encroaching on our rights. And there's a problem with the far right, and that they are too interested in totalitarian worship of Donald Trump and his, grasping for too much power in the executive. That's the big problem. Oh, now you've like defined concrete things, and now I know what you're saying, and you've identified things that that maybe don't have normative value initially. Now you're giving them some. You're telling me what's bad on both ends instead of just saying the far left and the far right, which are open to interpretation. Yeah.
Sure.
Wait, you know what? Let me just say this real quick. I've just invented this in my mind. That the initial thing when somebody's like the far left or the far right, I consider those to be fortune cookie statements where you're saying like, if you persevere, good things will come to you. It's like, okay, yeah. But like every single person would probably agree with this. The far left and the far right, except for the craziest people.
That's actually, so, this is why I disagree with the framing of what you just said.
Okay.
First off, I agree just saying far left bad, far right bad it doesn't achieve anything.
Yeah.
Like you said, you have to say how they're bad and on what issue.
Sure.
I guess the framework I approach is on literally every issue, there is a far left position that's bad and a far right position that's bad. And they're different, but they're both bad. And that's why we call one bad left and one bad right, because they are different and they're both bad.
Sure, but I already don't like the staging of this, because it's assuming that in every single argument we can identify a far left and a far right, and that the correct answer is going to be in some pretty negotiated middle ground between the two.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And I'm happy to be proven wrong in real time.
Sure.
On Destiny TV.
Mm-hmm.
I am 99.9% sure epistemically on the roots of everything I believe, mm-hmm. that you can do that 100% of the time on every issue. You can always identify a position that's too far left and too far right, and the middle ground is a synthesis of the concerns of both. That's the meme behind Enlightened Centrism, which is a meme I've recently rebranded away from. I won't say what I rebranded away from, but
sure. Okay. I kind of agree with you. Okay, follow me on this, okay? Because this is gonna get messy. I'm gonna draw out an example for you, okay?
If I had a nickel.
We're gonna use abortion as the example here. All the numbers and positions I give you are totally fake. I'm not saying that there's polling data supporting this, okay? All right.
I too spread misinformation.
Yes, okay.
Just kidding. Go ahead.
Let's say that I'm going to go left to right, and I'm making these numbers up, okay? Let's say all the way on the left, let's say that 1% of the population believes in unlimited abortion, okay? The baby's head is coming out, and the doctor's there with a hammer, okay? Ready to Paul Pelosi the baby right as it comes out. He's cave that right as it comes out, okay? Baby's on the ground making the noises and everything, okay? Yeah. So we've got the 1% on the very, very, very far left, okay? Then let's say we have 99% of left people are abortion legal for first trimester, okay? Okay.
That's where I'm at, by the way.
Okay. And then let's say you've got, let's say that on the right of this, you've got 1% of conservatives are saying, what would be a 1%? That like, let's say 1% are saying, Plan B is okay, and then rape and incest exceptions are okay. And then let's say you've got 99% saying, never abort ever. Okay.
Yeah, it's first degree. If a 19-year-old girl takes a Plan B pill, that's first degree murder, which is premeditated murder.
Sure.
And the person that did it should be locked up longer than someone who committed second degree murder.
Exactly.
Which is insane.
Right.
But let's say, okay.
Mm-hmm. So I typed this out in Discord. Okay. So
should I have the stream pulled up to see it?
You don't, well, you should read it. You don't have, your video doesn't, it's not that much. But like, so when we look at the spectrum of beliefs right here, okay, we've got 1% of the left is unlimited abortion. 99% is abortion legal for first trimester. And then we look at the right, and we've got 1% of people on the right, like Plan B is okay. We probably have like a rape and incest exception. And then 99% are really over there saying no abortions ever, first degree murder, right? When a person walks into this world and he says, well, I think that the far left and the far right are both wrong on this, and I think that we need a middle ground between the two. On a very strictly, maybe deductive sense, our middle ground is going to be somewhere in the absolute middle of this graph. But the intuitive feeling from most people is the middle ground between these are going to be really, really far to the right because of how many people are on and where they're on both sides of the spectrum. Does that make sense the way that I said this?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm following this logic. I have my issues. But
go for it. Yeah, that's what I'm saying is that like when people say that like the far left and the far right are both wrong, the implication there, even if people don't understand it, the implication is that the opinions are distributed in some sort of distribution that is like even on both sides between all the crazy opinions. And sometimes there are positions that like the far left and the far right might have an idea about slavery, but like it's not like a negotiated centrist position between the two. The correct answer is probably going to be, it's going to skew much harder probably on the anti-slavery side, I would say. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so a couple things. Number one, I would say the numbers that you put here, logically, if we're going to put those numbers there, then I agree with you. I would say this is not reflective of anything approximating reality. This hypothetical has as much utility as asking about, well, if we could go back in time and kill Hitler, it's like...
Well, hold on. To be clear, wait. The utility of the hypothetical is just to show that if the distribution isn't even on both sides, then saying that there's a negotiated middle ground that will always be true, it's not very satisfying, I think. Because people feel like that just can't be the case, that there's a middle ground between the two. Like, what is the reasonable middle ground here?
Okay, well, there's a couple
Go for
paths
it, yeah.
to go down. So first off, the I guess I'll hold on this for just a second. The abortion thing, the numbers that you gave are exactly my point, because the reality is almost everyone agrees we should not abort babies up until like the moment they come up, the moment they're born, right? The Ralph Northam, what is the Alex Jones thing? We'll keep the baby comfortable and all that. Like, that's insane. That's completely,
sure.
Like, I'm happy to call that satanic. And I think for good reason. I think it's equally insane to say the moment is like we should ban contraception, or we should, if a 19-year-old girl takes a Plan B pill, that's first degree murder. It was premeditated. Almost everyone agrees that both of those are too extreme on the issue of abortion, right?
Yeah, but there might be a lot more people that are closer to one thing than the other. And I think I can give you evidence of this kind of. The evidence would be that when people debate this topic, what they're doing is they're actually, even if they can't articulate it or intellectualize it intuitively, they're trying to do what I'm illustrating and articulating here. For instance, when a conservative argues, what does a conservative always say when they're arguing against abortion? What do they always talk about? They always talk about,
it's a life, it's a baby.
Well, kind of that,
killing babies.
But more specifically, they always mention third trimester abortions. Every time, you always hear third trimester. But as you said accurately, how many people actually support third trimester? Like, nobody. That's an incredibly rare position.
Right.
But what they're trying to do is they're trying to show they're trying to show a distribution to push people in a certain direction, to show that, like, no, most of the people on this are not actually correct at all, by making the other side be as heavily distributed to the most extremist opinions on the other side as possible.
Right. So it is entirely then the responsibility of the left to say, hey, fuck these, we agree these people are satanic nut jobs, and no one of any goodwill or common sense should support abortion up until the moment it's born. That's insane. And if people on the left were more vocal about that and preemptively neutralizing the conservative criticism, then suddenly the conservatives' best talking point is now gone. You've robbed the radical of their best talking point.
True, but now look at what happens then, and this is where you, play your dastardly role, all right? The far left and the far right, are bad, and we need to have some intellectual negotiated position in the middle. Well, because the far left wants to be, good, and we need to do what we need to do to disavow our crazies, well, now we've disavowed those people. Well, now who's there? Here's your new spectrum. Well, now what's the center? Because the far right is never disavowing their crazies, ever. So now you're like, well, fuck. Well, now the negotiated middle position.
Okay, right there, hold on.
Yeah,
right
go.
There.
Yep, go.
You said the right's never going to disabuse their crazies.
Yes.
I disagree with that. I think that there's examples. Well, first off, it depends on who we're talking about. But you're right. It is the obligation of. Okay, well, hold on. Two things. First off, it is the obligation of, when I say the left, I mean both. The biggest barrier to the interests of the good left and the good right is their own crazies mucking up their own, platform or positions or whatever, right? I believe there's a lot of moral criticism and necessary criticism of Israel that should be made. There is nothing that gets in the way of making that case than a bunch of autistic Zoomer Nazis who hide in their basement and can't get a girlfriend and then blame it on, the real thing is because it's the Jews. And they're like sitting in their Cheeto dust. It's like those people become, oh, look, hey, anyone who criticizes Israel, you don't want to end up like these people. And so now the valid criticisms that could otherwise have been levied against Israel have now been diminished because of these autistic Zoomer Nazis.
I understand what you're saying.
Same thing with the pro-Hamas left.
I understand what you're saying, but if you disavow your figures and the other side won't disavow theirs,
that's an advantage to you, because my point is the far right. The point I just made.
It's not an advantage to you. You're in a losing position. This is hence the unhinged rhetoric. This is the whole firefighter thing, right? Is that because then what happens is I have to discount a bunch of people that must be far left, because even the center left is disavowing them. But then when I turn to the right, there's a whole range of reasonable opinion, even if I would consider some of these opinions obviously needing to be disavowed. Okay. If you want, we could run through ton of examples, but because I think this is like very evident.
Hold on, let's stick with the abortion one.
Yeah, sure.
You know, I think her name is Sister Cindy. She's like the TikTok. There are these like fundamentalist Christians that go to campus and say like, you know, if you're a lesbian, you're going to hell. If you're gay, you're going to hell. This is murder. You know, it's like those people do more to undermine the pro-life argument than anyone else, because everyone's like, look, I don't really care that much about whatever the topic is, abortion or otherwise, but like these people are clearly weird. Human beings, most of their epistemics are intuitive, and if someone is weird, this is why the J.D. Vance weird thing is, I guess we'll see how effective it is, but in principle it could be effective, is because if you associate the like character flaws and psychological flaws with people who have a certain position, that's a great way to make sure that people don't want to get near that position. How many people don't want to criticize Israel precisely because it is true that a lot of the people who criticize Israel are a bunch of fucking freaks? It's like if those freaks didn't exist, then you'd be able to make the case that you want to make much easier. And your point about well, okay, now it's 99% abortion is legal for first trimester, but now like there's a lot of people saying we should lock up or we should ban contraception. That's like the most extreme one. Ban condoms. Condoms should be illegal. If I were on the left, I'd be like, hey, let's platform as many Republicans saying we should ban condoms as possible, because people can see that and go, that's insane. Now, if you believe that the average person is able to hear that and go, oh, maybe we should ban condoms or something like that, well, that's fine. Then we have just different presumptions about the world, because I have a lot more faith in
I'm appealing
coming from a charismatic person.
Yeah, I'm appealing so much to perception and anecdote here, and maybe we have different perceptions here. I don't know if we could, if either of us could prove this on the spot, but like when I think of abortion debates and a policy debate between two lawmakers or two big figures, here's what I'm thinking. This is always going to happen in the debate. Somebody on the right is invariably going to say, you need to disavow third trimester abortions. Why would anybody do this? You need to. I saw people who just had to wrestle with this. Everybody always brings up third trimester, right? And it's like, okay, fine. I do it. I disavow. That's horrible. I agree. It's bad. Okay. All right. And then when you say, do you disavow people that want to fucking ban contraception for teenagers? Do you want to disavow people that want to ban Plan B? Well, teaching contraception in school is actually really bad, and Plan B, sometimes it can affect the hormones, and it's like, there's never, ever an equivalent disavowal, and it never hurts them. And then when I go into a debate, go ahead. Yep, go.
That last part, we utterly disagree, because I would say the perfect example is Donald Trump not condemning the far right, whatever that was, the Proud Boy. The white supremacist thing where he said, who do you want me to condemn, Proud Boys? Stand back. It's like, arguably, that hurt him very significantly, versus had he said, white supremacists, they're losers. Anyone who goes and dresses up in those things are he could have easily spun it and got a laugh, but precisely because he didn't condemn his extremists, I think that worked to undermine him. Now, we
can say that, but that was a close election, and he was the second most votes any candidate's ever gotten in all of presidential history. So I mean,
but perhaps he would have. And fair enough, we don't know. This is my point, and I'm not trying to.
Sure.
Can you still hear me?
Yep.
I'm not trying to.
I hold on real quick. I understand what you're saying, that maybe that did hurt him, but oh my God, look at how far we have to go, right? All throughout the election, Biden and Harris are constantly saying the rioting, this is not okay. We shouldn't be burning down cities. The rioting's not okay. Could you imagine if it was like pulling teeth to get one of these guys to like disavow like a violent action from the left? It feels like the left.
Right after Trump said what we did, I'm not the Proud Boy thing. Biden said Antifa's not an idea, not an organization. It's like, what? Also stupid as fuck on Biden.
Hold on, because the difference is that the Proud Boys was a specific group of people that were involved in particular protests, and criticizing Antifa is like criticizing like BLM or conservatives or whatever.
I would say that's an optical win. It doesn't matter if it's a specific group.
No, in this case it did, because they were referring to a specific event that a specific group was at. And to just say like, oh, well, do you condemn Antifa? Like, all throughout their campaigning, Biden and Harris had condemned the riots. They condemned violence. Donald Trump never, ever meaningfully condemned any of the violence.
If we're just stepping out of the frame we're in right now,
sure,
momentarily, surely you would agree Antifa are fundamentally the same degenerate basement-dwelling freaks that the far right are.
Absolutely not. No, of course not. Like, I think
it's the same like personality types and all that. Like, it's the same fundamental.
People that are like activists or go on protests, like in general, are always going to be kind of weird. But like,
violent.
What? No, absolutely not. No, absolutely not. It's like saying BLM is like the protests for BLM are violent. That's not true. The vast majority of them aren't. Same thing with Antifa. There are crazy fucking people that protest as Antifa or riot as Antifa. There are crazy fucking people that do it as BLM, but it's not like a particular organ. It's just like it's a huge umbrella tent term.
Okay, I guess we just have fundamental, because like I would say you could say the exact same thing about the right. It's like so how many,
but you can't say the same thing about the Proud Boys. The Proud Boys was an explicit, specific organization of far-right, alt-right, racial extremists. It's a very specific, it's a group.
I don't think that's accurate. I believe Enrique Tarrio was a federal agent, and he's Hispanic as fuck. So
sure, and well, I mean, Nick Fuentes is also...
Yeah, but Nick Fuentes, if you didn't know he was Hispanic, you wouldn't be able to tell. Enrique Tarrio, you can tell.
Sure, no, that is true. Okay, maybe they backed off a little bit about the racial supremacy, but they were a far right, alt right, like far right, like the Tiki Torch March in Charlottesville wasn't just like a happenstance, random thing that happened. Like,
okay, but the Tiki Torch people in Charlottesville are the extreme, are like the BLM riots that did go violent. It's like how many people were at the Charlottesville riot that went violent? Several thousand.
It's not about who went violent. It's about like if there was an organization.
How many people held tiki churches?
I don't know how many, but I know that if there was an organization that staged a demonstration, and that organization was staging a demonstration with things saying like, go, I don't know, like go Hamas or whatever, I would say that like for instance, right now, here's what I would say, right? I would not say that college protesters, leftist protesters in the United States are evil, horrible people. But if you could show me an organization that organized a march, they were saying like they were pro-Houthis, and I would say whatever org that is, these are evil people. I don't care if only 10% of you are doing it. That's your organization. You're doing this. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But Antifa and BLM are like broad. They're not like, it's not like a particular thing, right?
Okay. I guess because I think we're getting...
Sure.
We're just comparing perceptions right now, and I'm not. That's
okay.
Not,
well, I will say in a very roundabout way.
Sure,
and we can eject off of this, which is fine. But I will say that in a way, what you're saying right here, I would argue, this is proving my point that conservatives have optically finagled, or not optically, rhetorically finagled these conversations to where we're even having to say, is Antifa the left equivalent of Black Lives Matter? This makes me want to say, oh, well, fuck. You know what we really needed? We needed more violent Black Panthers, because that would have been a specific organization we could. And now Antifa would just be like broad left-wing protesters. Like on the right, you've got counter protesters. I don't think they ever really have a fucking name. Blue Lives Matter, maybe, or whatever. But since we don't have that particular organization because we've been forced to disavow all the crazy far left extremist shit, well, now we're talking about Antifa and BLM. It's like, well, fuck, if I disavow that, Jesus, what, like those are the same as the Proud Boys, like a specific, like, organization with an actual leadership structure and coherent like marches that puts out announced, like, Jesus, they're not even the same thing. But I think that's a result of where the conversation has moved. Go ahead.
Okay, and fair, and yeah, and maybe we should eject, because like what you just said, it's like the violent parts of the BLM riots were objectively worse than any violent right-wing riots in the last 5-10 years, as far as I remember. In terms of damage done.
Objective is a hard word here, because we can value
damage done. In terms of damage done, like people killed, damage done. Now, January 6th, damage to democracy. Okay, fine.
Exactly what I'm saying. Subjective, what we value.
Yeah, and fair enough. And this is earlier. You made the point of people have different, like the Daryl Davis guy has a certain temperament.
Yeah.
So it would be wrong for him to engage and make the meme edgy jokes that you do.
Well, I wouldn't say it's wrong, but like he has his strategy and it's effective and it works for him.
Well, it would be wrong from a practical perspective. Like, that's not his style.
Sure. Yeah, correct. Yeah, it doesn't comport with his style.
It's a League of Legends stuff. It's like you don't build AD genre, right? It's like
maybe you don't, loser.
You should.
Yeah.
Well, actually, maybe that is a bad example. I haven't played in a while.
I've seen your Nunu and your ObGG, so careful.
Actually, the only champion I've ever gotten a pentakill with in a ranked team was Nunu.
Yeah.
Ever. That's because I play Warwick top and Volibear top, and I don't get past triple kills on that. But I had a 60% win rate and a 4.0 KDA on Volibear top. This was like season 6 with like 200 games. High platinum. This is before they added Emerald.
Okay.
Which case, listen, I don't want to get canceled for what I would say about Riot Games and League of Legends.
Okay. That's fair.
Yeah, this is the point about different temperaments doing different things. It's like our temperaments make us good. Our kits make us more adaptable to certain strategies.
Sure.
I would say our personalities also determine what our perceptions are.
To some extent, yeah.
Like again, my intuition and talking to you, I'm obviously more right wing than you. And
Mhm.
then when I talk to Andrew Wilson, I'm more left wing than him. Whatever. It's like certainly compared to you, my perceptions are just much more right wing of like the damage done to communities and lives from the Black Lives Matter riots is astronomically more significant so far than the January 6th damage. Now, you could say in history, 50 years from now, we look back in history and January 6th, because we didn't properly arrest everyone and it looked, King Trump took over and killed everyone. It's like, okay, fine.
Sure.
And that's certainly, I'm not ruling that out. My intuition says that's wrong. And the Black Lives Matter riots did much more material damage to the most vulnerable people in society.
Sure.
And it's just a matter of perceptual difference there.
Well, I don't disagree with you there.
Go ahead.
Yeah, if I don't disagree with that, materially, it would be almost impossible to argue with you. I'm just saying that the Proud Boys is an organization with hierarchy and structure, okay, that we can point to and look at leadership, messaging, organized plans or whatever.
Yeah.
And Antifa and BLM are just like large movements. Like if somebody
that's not an important. If anything, that distinction makes it like less relevant to because
the problem is that
worse that it's not a specific organization.
The problem is that when one is brought up in the context of the other, there is an equivalency created in the mind of the listener, and I think intentionally done in the mind of the speaker, in order to make these two things seem like one another. So if, for instance, we could say, and I would say, I think that being a Proud Boy is not good. Based on my understanding of the movement, what they stand for, their messaging, it's just never good.
I was going to say, to be clear, I think you might want to go with a different organization than Proud Boy, because I believe Proud Boy is like the Gavin McInnes like men's club.
Let me put this away. Okay. Gavin McInnes is not only is he fucking insane, so that's already a red flag. He left because the movement, I think, got too crazy. Even 2018, I think he left.
Sure.
He
But Enrique Tarrio was the leader, and Enrique Tarrio, whatever he is, he's not a white supremacist. He might
not be a white supremacist, sure, but he's crazy and he did crazy shit. And the message, I'm just saying that like if somebody were to say uniformly, right? If you're in the Proud Boys, it's probably not good. Okay. But if you've been to like a BLM protest or you've been to like an Antifa protest, there's a whole spectrum of people there. Some might be good, some might be bad. Some are surely bad.
Not Antifa. I would say Antifa, you're categorically in the same. Proud Boys and Antifa, in my mind. If you go to any meeting called Proud Boys or Antifa, you are probably of the same personality type.
Okay. Do you acknowledge at least that structurally they're far separate? They're different?
Of course.
Okay. The issue that I have is the issue that I have is the equivalency drawn between the two. It would be like, let's say somebody's like, I need you.
Moral equivalency, not structural.
No. There's other types of equivalencies drawn as well. Let's say that I'm having a conversation with somebody and I'm like, I want you to I want you to disavow. I need you to tell me you do criticize like Hitler's actions or something, right? Like you do think that like the death camps were bad or whatever, right? And somebody's like, I'll agree to that if you can admit that Harris and Biden continued the border camps for children that you said they were going to end. I'm never ever agreeing with that. Even if I agree with the proposition that they should have ended this particular policy, I'm not gonna make my agreement on that contingent on your agreement that Hitler's death camps were bad, because it's not just the moral equivalency. There's another type of ontological equalization happening there that I think the viewer is thinking. And I feel like, well, like I would say, I understand you disagree, but I would say even for you that like, yeah, Antifa and the Proud Boys, they're both like organizations that have bad people. It's like, they're definitely bad Antifa protesters. I don't like people generally if you call yourself Antifa, but it is fundamentally a different thing. Even if most of them are bad, it's fundamentally a different thing. Yeah. But
okay.
That's but okay.
Let's eject momentarily.
Okay.
Because the broader point is far left position, far right position, answer is somewhere in the middle. Your point about percentage of opinions at any given time, I think that's fair. Like you know, like for example, what's a good one? I don't know, like universities are clearly very far left wing, broadly speaking.
Half agree with you.
I'll take a half agreement. That's
okay.
Fair. And so certainly like, well, and it is changing so much. A lot of companies are like killing their DEI departments and all that.
The only reason why I said I would half agree is because like when we think of protests and like activists and shit, It's really a really small percentage of the student body. Like even up at like fucking Yale and shit. Like if you talk to students, most of them will say like, yeah, we don't do the protesting shit. We just go to class. But the people that do protest are very far left. Yeah.
About the faculty broadly. Like if you survey professors' opinions, they're almost all not even far left per se, but they're definitely left.
They're more left. Yeah, I would say the administrators are a huge problem for sure. Faculty can have issues. Sure. Administrators have a huge problem, I think. But yeah, that's why I say I have agree. But I would probably agree for all intents and purposes of what you're going to say. Yeah.
Yeah, but at any given time, you can imagine a world where the Christian nationalists take over and suddenly that's changing. Like I do worry about the Christian nationalist ascent, and then like banning evolution in schools. Like that's a real thing that could happen. That's concerning. Now, this is how I see it. Your role in the Great Meme Wars is to go. It's a good analogy. Malphite, maybe. Although you're too skinny. You dive in and you go straight in and you go like you go to Fresh and Fit.
Yeah,
you talk to Nick Fuentes,
I'm Tristana. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. Glass cannon still goes in.
Absolutely.
That's a very good analogy. Did you play a lot of Tristana? Was that like one of your main?
Hell yeah. What? Yeah. W is for forward. You always jump forward. If I'm ever playing a league game as Tristana, you see me W to escape. Oof. Big mistake.
The degree to which I wonder how much of that is a function of personality, like mapping. Like I just like this character.
Sure. Well, anyway. if you want to know how much is a function of personality, my main was Draven. So there you go.
That's fair. But my point is, your job in the meme wars is to go straight fucking in. W's for forward. You don't care. You'll talk to Fresh and Fit. You'll talk to Nick Fuentes. You'll talk to.
Sure, it's one of the things I have a strength at doing so. Yes.
Yeah, and I would say specifically, like Jordan Peterson, I think he is acting cowardly when he says he will utterly refuse to have a conversation with someone like Nick Fuentes or something like that.
Okay.
Now you could say from a practical perspective, Jordan Peterson would just get steamrolled because he doesn't understand memes and he gets angry too easily, and that would get exploited. And that's probably true. Peterson has, due to his commitment to the Daily Wire and all the lies that you're required to internalize, I would believe, as a condition for working there, he has fallen from grace.
Are you a Nazi?
Are you asking me unironically?
I just connected like four things in my head. You're talking a lot about the Daily Wire and how that was the downfall of him and not Bill 16. You just mentioned the lies that were internalized there, which is a huge Candace Owens talking point about having to defend Israel because Ben Shapiro is Jewish. And then you've made analogies in the past, a lot referring to defending or attacking the nation of Israel. Oh, shit.
Did you hear me talk about autistic Zoomer Nazis earlier? And how they utterly...
True, but Fuentes calls himself an autistic Zoomer Nazi. And you didn't say no when I just asked you now. Oh, shit. Okay, sorry. Go ahead. My bad. Go ahead. I said that. I was just poisoning it well a little.
I get that that's funny, but you have a large audience, and so
you're good.
That's
Don't worry about it. My bad. Just kidding.
Nobody hates Nazis more than I do. Okay, and I think Nazis are as bad as communists. How about that?
Wow.
What was I saying before you?
Before I mind fucked you. You said that you said that Peterson was a coward for not talking to Fuentes, but you understand why he has to do it because he has to carry the Daily Wire talking points. Yeah. And by the way, what I mean by that is I regard Netanyahu as a fucking barbarian, and they got dinner together, and that whole organization is clearly of the opinion that we shouldn't criticize Netanyahu in the middle of the war. And it's like, okay. Not even the most. Benny Morris doesn't defend Netanyahu. Benny Morris calls Netanyahu a complete idiot. Like there's almost no one of any repute who seems to be defending Netanyahu. Yeah,
and for good reason, I think. So that's why I don't like Peterson at the Daily Wire.
Okay.
But to the point about different personality types engaging in different, what do you call it? Like strategies. Yeah, whatever. Maybe Jordan Peterson shouldn't be talking to Nick Fuentes, but like you don't care about edginess. You can go in. You can talk to anyone. That's your kit. That works.
A little bit. I do think it's a little unfortunate. I feel like I'm equipped. I can excel in some things that I think are highly contradictory generally for traits that you see in people. Like I think that I can like at my best, have incredibly compassionate and empathetic conversations with people, which I think I've demonstrated by
Yeah, true.
talking to a lot of
Destiny.
people.
I 100% agree.
Yeah, but I also excel a lot in being an absolute degenerate piece of shit, screaming down somebody's throat and trying to demonstrate that they're a dumb fuck, right? Which are
Mr. Borelli mode.
Yeah,
Yes,
and these things
that's
are
why it's a
very
toggle. And they both have their applications.
Sure.
I mean that unironically.
Yeah.
And I think that's why you're so successful is because you do operate in both. Now,
kind of, yeah.
I would say
there's levels of success, and where some people would say that, yeah, wow, well, Dr. Borelli has just destroyed Dr. Bonelli because now, or Dr. Morelli, right? Because now people won't talk to you because you've been too whatever. Fuck you. Yeah. You're Frankenstein, you're whatever, your shit is fucked, you're other people. But then on the flip side, because people only see what they want to see, me being really empathetic and compassionate to people has also fucked me in a lot of cases as well. There's a lot of communities that hate me just because of who I talk to. Yeah. So it's always a balancing act. But I have to balance it compared to my personal stuff, because if I rely on any community, I would just be one or the other. But yeah.
Yeah, and I would say in some sense, like your job everyone serves Enlightened Centrism. That's how I see it. Okay. Enlightened Centrism is the great meme, the union of order and chaos. This is the basis of Petersonian maps of meaning philosophy, which I have internalized, and I've searched the internet far and wide for anyone even approximating a convincing critic of Peterson's underlying philosophy. Never heard of it.
Okay.
Happy to talk to anyone who disagrees with it to the point where they think they can criticize it.
Wow.
In a compelling way.
Okay.
That's my claim. At the basis of that is union of order and chaos. The truth lies in the balance of these two fundamental aspects of reality, which we can abstract out to left and right. So everyone serves Enlightened Centrism. Your job is to stop people who would otherwise go too far left from going too far left. Right? I presume that you are not in favor of 13-year-olds being able to get double mastectomies.
The surgery stuff, probably not.
For the purpose of gender,
obviously,
not like cancer or some shit.
Thanks for clarifying. Yeah, you almost got me on that one.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
a Nazi shows good faith here.
Yeah. I generally probably not, but like my answer for this is always just going to follow like medical research.
Exceptions. Okay.
Well, no, not exceptions. It would just follow like outcome related research. I don't have like a strong moral foundation here where I'm like 13-year-olds can never make this decision. It would be like, if research came out and, there's so many people doing this and there was a whatever attrition rate and blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh, okay, fine. Fuck it. If it works, then go for it. Yeah. I would just follow it on that. Yeah. So my understanding right now is like SRS, sex reassignment surgery, and top surgery isn't go ahead.
Okay. I won't, even though I feel licensed and you just asked if I was a Nazi, I won't go down if medical research suggested that 13-year-olds are capable of giving sexual consent, should that also be considered too? Don't even answer. Don't play.
Yes, absolutely. I know a lot of hot 13-year-olds, so.
Enlightened Centrism, everyone serves it. You, like I said, employ your edginess as demonstrated.
Okay. If I was being edgy, I would have said 7-year-old. No, I'm just gonna go ahead. Your role, what?
My role in the Great Meme Wars is to
just to be really clear. Hold on to clarify on that. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't actually know any hot 7-year-olds. Okay, sorry. Go ahead. I'm done. Go ahead.
My role in the Great Meme Wars is to tell conservatives, hey, we don't have blue hair anymore, but when you did have blue hair, this blue-haired SJW. He calls conservatives artards, fascist, all this different stuff. This guy that, you guys hate. He stops a lot of people on the left from advocating for 13-year-olds getting their breasts surgically removed or insert whatever extreme left-wing position you don't agree with, socialism or something. My job is to tell the conservatives, hey, listen, if the price that you have to pay for a large figure on the left, preventing people from going too far left, advocating for, like the Hassan Piker world, if the price you have to pay for that is this, streamer guy calls you artards every now and then, my job is to convince them that that's worth it, because I do think it's worth it. I do think you being edgy and saying things that I would regard as incorrect or wrong or whatever, immoral, degenerate, whatever. It's like, insert whatever word. You still have, arguably that is what enables you to do the things that I think are good. And I think that everyone has, I think that's a temperamental thing. I think for anyone who's a large figure, not anyone, because you can get true, genuine grifters, but like Candace Owens. Like, Candace Owens Well, geez, let's see. How do I say this optically correct? I think Candace Owens absolutely is in possession of a lot of truth, unfortunately. She says things that are true. Like I'm doing the Candace Owens Champion Spotlight, so I'm watching a lot of her podcasts, and it's like she's not lying when she cites like specific historical events. I think Solomon Morell, all these different people or whatever. So she's fulfilling a role. Now, I would say it's unfortunate because she's incompetent in many ways, just like I am and you are in our own ways. I think she recently she said Stalin was Jewish or something, and even Nick Fuentes was like,
based. Okay.
Yeah, he was not Jewish. So she's clearly making mistakes. But like, I think it is good, for example, and I would say Tucker Carlson falls in the same role, that there is people within the Christian framework, the Christian nationalist framework, who are pushing back against like Christian evangelical Zionism. The politicians who say literally the basis for their foreign policy is, well, Israel is, there's a verse in the Bible that says God will bless those who bless Israel. And so that's what I'm going to do. There's a clip of a congressman being asked, and he's like, my grandma or someone taught me that Israel was, the chosen land or the moral land or whatever. It's like, that is the literal basis that U.S. politicians are deciding whether or not to allocate tax dollars, or more consequently, determine whether or not there's U.S. involvement in a, imminent war with Iran, which we're still on the fucking potential edge of. And it's like, so Candace Owens, in her own maladaptive way, fulfills an important role. And you, in your own, what I would regard as maladaptive way, fulfills a role.
Okay.
And I pull the strings and orchestrate the whole thing on behalf of Enlightened Centrism.
How do we tie in at the end?
What didn't. I was making it. It was a very bold claim.
Oh, we were trying to. Okay. Hoping it.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to poke you on one thing. Okay. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to go full autism mode. Ready?
No better mode.
Hold on. Would you agree broadly with the statement that when humans are communicating with each other, there's always some level, some degree of normativity in the statements that we make to each other? Like, even if I say something like, the car is back from the shop, that just because I chose to utter those words, I think there's some utility, some goodness I'm providing, some benefit in you hearing the information, and there's something you can do to deploy this information in a useful way. There's some degree of normativity baked in almost everything we say.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
All truth is, I ascribe to my understanding of pragmatism, which is Jordan Peterson's squirrely way of comparing truth to utility. So yeah, and utility is ultimately subjective.
Okay.
It's but
I'm walking you somewhere because I don't like the statement you made that Candace Owens says true things. Okay. And I'm going to use this example, and here's the macro argument I'm trying to justify. I don't think you can say, I don't know if I would consider a thing true if it's part of a broader context that is not true. I think it becomes meaningless, or I think that we have to be very careful when we take apart those statements. So this will be my example, okay? If I ask you, like, do you agree with this statement? Okay, and I were to say, like, killing, and that's it, right? I imagine that you wouldn't have an opinion on this because it's just a word, right?
I think this guy's probably autistic.
Sure, okay. Let's say that I say that killing is bad. Do you agree with this statement?
Generally.
Okay. What if I say killing is bad when you do it in self-defense? Imagine you'd have a much bigger problem with that statement.
Generally not. Not.
What if I say killing is bad when you do it in self-defense while you're robbing someone?
So I need to understand more.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay.
That's what I would say.
Sure. I think that the issue is that killing or killing is bad is a part of all of these statements. But if you're picking out only a part of it, man, the overall message that you're conveying can change really dramatically, such that citing the underlying fact, however true it may be, is the truthiness of that fact is almost irrelevant because of the way that it's being utilized in a particular argument.
Sure. You can say things that are like propositionally true, knowing that they will cause the other person to think of something that's
Untrue.
wrong.
Yes.
Yeah.
True. Okay.
Yeah. Like the extreme example is like you can say, there's this guy and he slept with a child. It's like, okay, well, if that guy is the child's parent and the parent came into his bed after he had a nightmare when he was 2 years old, it's like, okay, you've said something that's technically true with knowing that it's going to convey a lie.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. Right. I trolled, I think JFK, a bunch of conservatives had some weird thoughts about me and kids. I don't know why. And I tweeted out that I had indeed fucked a 16-year-old in like 2005. I'm talking about my high school girlfriend. I was 16 as well. Right. This is true, but like you can take a thing. Yeah, right. The only reason I say this is because, so this is another issue that I run into, is that when people say somebody says some things that are true or false, on a human level, we're really generally just looking at the overall message. And it's pretty rare that people are picking out small things from that message. And if somebody says that they say some true things and some problematic things, they're not thinking, okay, this guy rejects Candace's conclusion, but he accepts some underlying facts. People are actually thinking, okay, he only accepts about 70% of Candace's conclusion. One of these statements of accepting some underlying propositions, but wholly rejecting the conclusion is way different than accepting the conclusion about 70%. Would you agree with that?
Then accepting, say it again.
That like there's a huge difference between saying like if I were to say this statement, in some ways Hitler was a good guy, your mind isn't thinking, and that statement is objectively true. If we were to dive into all the things that he's done in his life, we can find some good things, right? But if you say, okay, hold on, when Destiny says Hitler's a good guy, I agree with some things that he says, and I disagree with other things. People aren't thinking that you've torn apart, you're rejecting the conclusion and you're agreeing with some underlying propositions. They're thinking you're agreeing with the conclusion about 60, 70% of the time. And those are meaningfully different things. Does that make sense? Or do you want me to say that one more time? Sorry.
I think I'm following. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, I guess continue.
That's so what I'm saying is that I feel like, yeah, go ahead.
When I say Candace Owens says true things, like specifically I'm referring to like, what's his name? Solomon Morel or whatever is like, this Polish, Ashkenazi Jew, I think, or I guess Ashkenazi is only from Russia, but Polish Jew who after World War II was like the head of a concentration camp against Germans, and then he fled to Israel, and they basically protected him. And the Polish tried to extradite him for war crimes, and it's like, okay, that's it. I looked it up on Wikipedia. Okay, this seems like a historical. She's not pulling this out of thin air. And my concern is then, okay, if normal people who are not Nazis, and I'm not saying Candace Owens is Nazi, but if normal people who are not so mentally degraded and delusional to have problems with Jewish people as a race, because there's a fundamental difference between Judaism, the religion, which can be and is fundamentally at the end of the day separate from Judaism or Jewishness as a race, and all of the autistic Zoomer Nazis are the ones who have problems with Jewish people as a race, which is insane. But like, if people who are not like, hey, yes, all religions should be criticized, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, all that, if those people are not the ones pointing out like, yes, Solomon Morel's a real person, this is not something we should like, cover up or whatever, then the only people who are in possession of this particular truth are now the radicals.
Which is a problem. I agree.
And it makes them seem more credible than they would otherwise had normal people just been more like, of course we're not afraid of truth. Yes, this is a real thing. And it's indicative of the truth, which is Israel is deserving of criticism, just like all secular countries, fundamentally.
Yeah, I agree with that. But what I'm saying is there has to be an extra careful attention paid to the rejecting of the conclusion, because people don't hear you rejecting the conclusion when you say some of the things they say are true. What they hear is a percentage acceptance of the conclusion. That there's a huge distinction between these two things. So, for instance, let's say that I told you, I know a guy who can predict. Jesus Christ. If I lock him in a room, I know a guy who can predict with 50-50 accuracy whether or not it's going to be daytime or nighttime outside, right? Would you say that guy is correct?
50% accuracy?
Yeah, 50% accuracy. Would you say, yeah, he's correct some of the time? He's correct half the time.
I guess depends on the time of day. But
yeah, but it's a chance. He's flipping a coin.
Or if he pulls a card from a deck, it's either red or yellow, or red or black.
Yeah, red or black. Yeah, and he's right 50% of the time. Are you giving this guy credit as a truth sayer sometimes?
No, I would say, why did someone just make that statement? That sounds like something an autistic person would say, and I'd like to know what point they're making, because every statement is made in the context of some motivation for making the statement.
Sure, I agree with you 1,000,000%. But that would be my worry then with like Candace Owens stuff. That when I looked at, or at least some of her recent stuff, I think I watched, to be fair, I've only watched one full video and then I've seen a ton of bizarro Twitter clips. But it looks like she's been, and I'd say she's been on probably for over a couple years now, on some crazy anti-Semitic binge. So every single fact that she's been digging up over the past 2 years has just been to find ways to show that like Jews are like controlling society, doing evil shit. So even if she does propositionally, proffer some things that are true, I would never say, Candace is right about some things, because I don't think she's right about anything. She might utter facts or statements that are true, but it's always in service of her ending like anti-Semitic Nazi goal. So whatever is
Candace Owens is an anti-Semitic Nazi. Do you think that's
absolutely. More so than most people blatantly are. I don't know if it's because she's black, she can get away with it like Kanye did, but yeah, I think she, or at least to be fair, just from the things that I've seen posted of her, and then some of the long form content I've watched, she seems to be very obsessed about certain Jewish conspiracies, though, that I've only ever seen given in Nazi circles. I think just today I saw
people could say the same thing about you, like with what you said about Palestinians or something like that, if they only saw the worst clips and then one full video.
That's true, but then if you were to ask me something very explicit, I would never dance around the question. I'd give you a complete and total upfront and honest answer, number one. And number two, you can find plenty of video evidence to the contrary.
I've watched enough Canada. She is a...
Like today, I think I just saw she was doing the ADL trope, where that first guy, there was some black guy or something that got exonerated, and people and people try to rewrite this story.
What is your Well, I see this. I don't even want to get into this.
Sure.
Especially after that's why I was a fucking Nazi.
Yeah.
It's like you said. I would never say that Candace Owens is right about anything.
Not with just that. No, I would have qualified that statement way more.
Okay, and look, fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I guess, I'm not saying, nothing I'm saying here is to convince you that I'm right or versus. It's like I'm just outlining my perception of things. It's like that's your strategy, and if you think that the way to push back against radicals is to, even if they say something that's like objectively true.
Mm-hmm.
On like some specific historical fact, if someone asks you, like, yes or no, Candace Owens says some true things, and you say no, it's like, okay, that's one strategy, and we'll see how.
Sure, but I wouldn't.
My thing, I have the opposite inclination of like, of course there is almost nothing, like you said, the Hitler thing. It's like, well, okay, Hitler loved dogs, whatever. It's like that's the archetypal example, whatever. Stalin was against wealth inequality, right?
Sure.
It's like, my first instinct is to immediately validate whatever true things an extreme person is being said, so that their guard goes down, and I can say, yeah, like, of course, are there all these things that Israel does wrong? It's like, yeah, obviously, and anyone who says otherwise is gaslighting you. And then once people are like, okay, cool, I can trust this guy, I'd be like, yeah, but you understand that there's a fundamental difference between Jewish ethnicity and Judaism, right? Because they're not going to accept that message from anyone unless they're at least like, okay, at minimum, you have to agree that Candace Owens says some true things sometimes. And you're saying, well, no. And it's like, okay, I think that makes it difficult to create the inroads that
I understand what you're saying.
You
I'm
might
just
wanna
saying that
create
like
with your
it's
W,
it's
always
the
move
same
forward.
thing as like what I was saying before, where like if I'm in front of Dave Rubin, I'm never condemning violence on the left in the presence of this guy because he's never condemning violence on the right. I'm not going to give that concession to give the appearance of because by doing some true things, I'm actually creating a false impression, even though we're saying things that are true, right? I condemn the violence on my side. Nobody should ever be getting assassinated ever or killed at political rallies in the United States of America. That's horrible, right? But if I offer that up, and I would say that is a true statement, but they on their side refuse to make any of the same concessions, I've created a false impression by uttering a true thing in the mind of the listener, because now they're like, okay, yeah, there are some problems on the left. I'll give Destiny credit for admitting it, but yeah, there are definitely some problems on the left that they need to deal with. I don't want the person to come away thinking that. I want them to hear me screaming and then think, damn, this Destiny guy's kind of unhinged. There's some problem on the left. I wish he'd disavow it. But also, damn, why can't Dave Rubin just say like J6 was bad or just admit that like they should, right? I would rather them coming away with a negative opinion of both of us than me leaving them with the false impression as a reasonable leftist that we have issues that we need to work on and the right is fine. That's my issue. Oh, another really great example is in the same vein is I made this argument when Assange was leaking stuff about the DNC that selective transparency is actually worse than no transparency because
that's the same principle
exactly
of saying a technically true thing in service of a lie.
Yeah, because it leads you to the false impression that like, well, I see bad things here, I don't see any there. These guys must be way worse than these guys. Well, you have no idea. And if you didn't know anything, you'd have a better opinion than if you knew some true things. So that's the broader thing that So like on a purely autistic, discrete level, like if you and I were just talking and you were like, Candace Owens says some true things, I would agree with every single thing you're saying. Not only would I agree with what you're saying, I would also agree that, yeah, you have to own the things she's saying. Otherwise, if you don't ever talk about those things, only the extremists talk about them. Of course, I would agree with that 1,000,000%. But in a broader conversation, I would never be caught dead on a show saying, Candace Owens does say some things that are true, for sure. That's never on its own being there.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess the way I see it is, and this is going to sound condescending or whatever. I don't mean it. I mean it like in the meme way that we were talking about it. It's like, this sounds like Tristana explaining to me why her kit is the best. It's like, it is if you go 20 and 1 and 5 or whatever. And it depends on the circumstance. Surely you would agree there is a massive chunk of Candace Owens' audience who you are utterly unable to reach because of the way that you approach things, for better or worse. And I'm not necessarily
probably, yeah, for sure, yeah.
That's my point then about why everyone serves Enlightened Centrism in their own way. Is like,
sure,
you can't reach them, but like I have no problem agreeing with Candace Owens that Antifa and the rioters of BLM did more damage than the January 6ers. That's a precondition for me even being able to talk to Candace Owens' audience. And I would say it's a precondition because it's true. And then the flip side, though, those are for right-wingers. A precondition for talking to the left-wingers is saying, well, of course January 6th is worse than BLM. And it's like, this goes down to then what is fundamentally true. It's like, it's all utility. It's like, what are you trying to achieve by saying anything?
Okay.
And that was the summary of my video that ended with me calling you autistic.
Sure. I can kind of understand what you're saying there, yeah.
Cool. Anything else in your mind before I head out here in a few minutes?
No, I think that's about it, yeah.
The next champion spotlight is the Candace Owens. I called her the Dark Templar.
Jesus, that's not even a League of Legends champion.
Well, no, I make up all the names. Jordan Peterson's the hammer. You're the master debater.
You're right. I'm so sorry. Hold on. My bad. You did a thing. I don't think you really do you know what StarCraft is?
Yes, I know it's StarCraft.
In StarCraft 2, there's a unit called Dark Templar, and it sounded like you named it after that unit, but you didn't. I understand now. I'm sorry.
No. And I called her Dark Templar because she's engaging in the dark side of things.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what other reason.
Because she's black.
Autistic. Only an autistic person would make that connection, surely.
Oh shit. Okay.
Okay. Appreciate the conversation. I am not a Nazi for what it's worth, and I feel like having to say that makes you.
You're good. All right.
Less believable. But no. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Anytime. If you want roles or whatever, my Discord, if you want to hop in a chat, just feel free to shoot me a message and yeah. Have fun. Be careful.
Appreciate it.
Stay safe. Bye.
Godspeed.